It's good to be with you again this morning, and in this capacity as well. There's some things that just always feel very familiar. The one is that technology works great the day before you need it, and so we thought we had our remote all hooked up, and it disconnected again, so we'll have to just try to keep the slides in gear. Fortunately, I've experienced enough with technology that I knew that I should probably do a separate layout for projectionists as well. Summer in the Psalms, and what a great refreshment this could be as we think of the songs of the people of God. I'm going to be doing the Psalms of Zion. The Psalms of Zion. Zion is a word that we don't usually use. I served interim in St. Thomas, and the church there had been previously known as Zion Missionary Church. And there's lots of confusion in the community as far as, what's a missionary church? That was confusing enough. But then Zion, lots of people thought, well, is this something to do with Judaism or what's going on here? So that there was some confusion around that name. We oftentimes, and you'll find in many translations of the Bible, instead of using Zion, it uses the word Jerusalem. So some translations use the word Zion, others use the word Jerusalem. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's get our thinking going in the right direction. And I have a question for you. Do you have a favorite place that always seems to call your name? And you think of a place of refreshment, an opportunity for you to go and to just feel relaxed. And I think there would be some points at Mishawa for some people that might be that very thing. If I was to count as favorite the place that I have photographed the most at different times of the year and different times of the day, then my favorite place would have to be this place. I seem to have more pictures of this than most other pictures that don't include people. But what is it that draws your attention to and affection for a particular place? Maybe it's the beauty of it. Just the aesthetics, whether it's architectural, whether it's the gardens, but those things that just strike you as being beautiful. Or perhaps it's the history of a place. And you know that there's kind of that weight of history. Now, here in our area, we think things are old if they're 50 to 100 years old. And drive through New Dundee, that's us, Don. Yeah. We drive through downtown New Dundee, wherever that is, and you see some old buildings. Well, they're not quite at the point yet where you enjoy them just for their age. But there are places that you look at and the history strikes you. Or maybe it's the significance of it. The fact of what went on at that place. And it strikes you as being that which draws your attention in the very significance of it. Well, the city of Jerusalem arguably answers the criteria of beauty. Now, there's some places maybe more beautiful than others, and I'm speaking this as somebody who has never been there. I know that many here have walked the streets of Jerusalem. It certainly answers to the question of history and significance. It's historical significance that always drew and continues to draw the hearts of God's people to that place. Why is it that so many people go there on tour? It's a significant place in the world. And so that draws people to go as visitors, but maybe also to go as residents and to move there. Well, I was fortunate enough to find a 3,000-year-old drone image of Jerusalem. And so about the time of David, this was I think they touched it up just a little bit. It was kind of grainy image. So this city included what was known as the City of David. Now, oftentimes we refer to the entire city of Jerusalem as the city of David, but the city of David was actually a little area just outside of what became the Temple Mount. It was a place where the tabernacle was first placed, and then the temple was built during the reign of King Solomon. But there's something else in this area that's of great significance and deep history. And we'll speak about this a little bit more in a moment or two. But there was a significance, and it caused them to sing about it. And so if we do a search in Bible Gateway, if you're not familiar with that app, it's a good one to be familiar with. You can replace an awful lot of work that people did in establishing concordances, of putting themes together. Augustus Strong Concordance, it took him 40 years to do that. Well, now in a couple keystrokes, you can just pull it all up. If he was still alive, he'd have a nervous breakdown to realize that all of his work could be so easily replaced. But if you do a quick search in the New International Version, and I said before, some versions use Jerusalem, some use Zion. But in the NIV, if you use Zion and look for where it's mentioned in the Psalms, you will find that it is found in Psalm 2, 9, 14, 20, 48, 50, 51, 53, 65, 69, 74, 76, 78, 84, 87, 97, 99, 102, 110, 125, 126, 128, 129, 132, 133, 134, 135, 137, 146, 147, 149, sold! Oh, almost sounded like that should have followed that. A deep, deep history. This was a place that, and Zion, just quickly to recognize that the name Zion is not just a substitute for the word Jerusalem. It's not just an optional sub-out, but it means high point or castle, and symbolically Jerusalem or even the Jewish people. It was a place of worship. It was a place of refuge. And I mentioned a moment ago that there was a great deeper significance. In the book of Genesis, chapter 22, we read, sometime later God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to him, "Father, Abraham." "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. Now, if we were just to stop our reading at this point, we would look at this historically as a significant place where Abraham was demonstrating his own faith in God. And this is referenced in Scripture at different times. But let's go on. It said, when they reached the place that God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar. On top of the wood, he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." And here is what became a point of celebration for God's people. Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day, it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Now there's something to sing about. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. What a deep resonance in the heart of this people, understanding that only a God who would be able to raise from the dead those who could preserve the promises that were made. We can, and this is not a message about Abraham's struggles that he must have had at that opportunity, but we are certainly told in Scripture that his faith was great. And then God's people would forever in that place sing the song of a substitutionary sacrifice. They would sing about that which was their hope and being able to come into the presence of the living God. It was a place where they would sing songs of God's mercy and majesty. They would sing of God's wisdom in providing a place where his people could come and celebrate his goodness. And then we turn our attention to the Psalms. Now, we're not going to look at every one of those 31 Psalms that I rattled off a few moments ago, but we'll just look at a couple of examples. Psalm 87. Now, maybe you don't look at titles on Psalms. Maybe you just want to get to the heart of it. Maybe you don't read the preface when you're reading a book. Maybe you don't read the introduction. You want to just get into it. Well, if you read the titles, you might have stopped to think, who on earth are the sons of Korah? The sons of Korah, a psalm, a song. Well, if you want a quick introduction to Korah, you're going to have to, and this is not, I don't think, a rabbit trail. Let's just call this an additional extra at no additional cost. How about that? So if you go to the book of Numbers, chapter 16, you'll find the story of Korah. Korah was a Levite, but God had separated out a small group of Levites who would serve as high priest. And that smaller group were the descendants of Aaron, Moses and Aaron. So the descendants of Aaron would be the ones who would serve as high priest. But there were many other Levites, descendants of Levi, of the 12 tribes of Israel. Korah, he kind of led a revolt against Moses and Aaron, as if to say, who do you think you are? That we're all holy, you know, I mean, why are you set aside as the high priest? Why are we just left with some of the other jobs of the temple? It wasn't even the temple at that point, but the tabernacle. Why are we left with these other jobs when we don't get that prestige of being high priest? Well, if you read in Numbers 16, you will see that judgment was meted out on Korah, and Korah died, and all those who stood with Korah died because of the hand of God. Earth opened up, swallowed them, and it was pretty dramatic, I think. God demonstrated his glory even in his judgment in that case. But if you go back to the book of Exodus chapter 6, you will see listed there the sons of Korah. And when you see those who stood with Korah at the time of judgment, his sons are not listed there. They were standing with the rest of them. They were not revolting against Moses. And the sons of Korah, the descendants of Korah, that were not involved in that act of judgment, became those who contributed, as Moses said they should, to the life of worship of the people of God. They became the musicians. They became the songwriters. They became those who served in many different ways, in whatever ways the Lord wanted. Okay, so that's a bunny trail, okay? But now you know. Now you know, first of all, you should look at the titles. Number two, you also know a little bit about the sons of Korah. Psalm 87 is a psalm about the city, this place. He has founded his city on the holy mountain. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the other dwellings of Jacob. Glorious things are said of you, city of God. I will record Rahab and Babylon among those who acknowledge me. Philistia too, and Tyre along with Cush. And I will say, this one was born in Zion. Indeed, of Zion it will be said, this one and that one were born in her. And the Most High himself will establish her. The Lord will write in the register of the peoples, this one was born in Zion. As they make music, they will sing, all my fountains are in you. A beautiful city, a city that was celebrated, the high place. The significance, though, sometimes might get lost. We talked a little bit about the kind of depth of significance that this place would have. And certainly to those of us today, with additional historical things that have happened there, we have a lot to sing about Zion, about this high place. But let's fast forward. About 1,000 years from when this psalm was written. And we find another song over Jerusalem. And it was a song of lament over Jerusalem by Jesus himself. Now, we don't always think about it as a song, but here is the one, the Son of God, who sang creation into existence, who spoke and it was done. And he spoke over Jerusalem this word of lament. Well, there's two places where we find slightly different record of what Jesus said. In Luke 19, when he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, what would you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace? But now they are hidden from your eyes, for the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side, tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. They will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Focusing on the place instead of what the place was really all about. Focusing not on the one who made it glorious, but the more limited glory of what came from his actions. In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus is recorded as saying, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." The truth being that we can so often look at the blessings of God and lose sight of the blesser. Lose sight of what truly is the significance of this place, of this act, of this provision of God. And we can get sidetracked from him. Well, what Jesus said and is recorded in Luke about the destruction that was to come on Jerusalem, it happened just a few years later. In AD 70, the Roman armies came in and they destroyed Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple. And this great scattering of God's people was kicked off. It wasn't, they were moving throughout the world before, but it was largely for business purposes. But they were ejected from their land. The Jewish people were scattered around the world with a large population, a large concentration in Europe. Came to the United States, large population in some of the major cities in the United States. But what started happening in the 1800s in Europe is that anti-Semitism started to arise. Anti-Semitism is just being opposed to the Jewish people. The idea of raising their voices against the Jewish people, a hatred of and a discrimination against this people. And we're told there were different reasons for that. One of them was that oftentimes the Jewish people, because of reasons that we won't get into this morning, found themselves placed in the financial sector. And so that with that involvement, they sometimes found themselves in difficult situations with those who had borrowed money from them. But that anti-Semitic influence was rising. But also something else that was rising at the same time was this desire for this place of refuge. So when difficult times come, we get this idea that we want this place of refuge. And they were not unfamiliar with their Bible. They were not unfamiliar with Zion. And so we have the rise of what's called Zionism. And so in the 1800s, as Zionism started, and so the migrations of Jewish people started as well back to the Holy Land, back to what was then called Palestine. And so what we find historically is that there was this movement to return to that place of significance, that place of safety. The British had control of that area known as Palestine. In 1917, they signed the Balfour Declaration, which was recognizing that this would be a place for the Jewish people. And now we find all this stuff, this argument about two-state solution and all these things that are being debated. And, it wasn't quite like when the Jewish people returned from their captivity in Israel, where they came back and under the leadership of Joshua came in and conquered and retook this land or re-involved themselves in this land. So in the return to the land after 1917, you had these people coming in and they found themselves being squeezed out, where the Palestinian people did not want to receive them. And there was all kinds of political stress and stressors that went on. Finally, in 1948, became the Jewish nation. And I don't know if you watch the news at all. There's nothing happening, so there's no reason to watch the news. Nothing's happening in the world. But you might know that there are some pretty tense times that are going on and have gone on in what we regularly call the Middle East, between Israel and the Palestinians, Hamas, Hezbollah, all the groups that are leading in that. And you have this rise again of anti-Semitism around the world. But at the same time, increasingly, people are returning to Zion, seeing that as a place where it's safe for them. And we could argue and debate relative to the wisdom of some of these settlements. We could argue and debate about what's going on in Gaza, but that would take us quite far from just this psalm. But it is relevant. I'll give you another quick freebie, okay? Oftentimes, if people argue against, say, what the Israeli government is doing, say in Gaza, the argument is raised that, that's anti-Semitic. Well, I don't believe that for a moment, because we have lots of good examples in history of those who raised their voice against what the governing powers of Israel did, and they were not anti-Semitic. They are the class of people that we know as the prophets. The prophets were not anti-Semitic, but they didn't always agree with the governing powers of Israel. And I think that it is important for us to recognize that we can disagree with what Israel as a government is doing and still be very supportive of the Jewish people. I find myself being very supportive of the Jewish people. I don't think what's being done right now is wise. I don't think what's being done right now is something that historically people are going to want to sing about. What we need to sing about is God's provision, God's open door. Well, that was just a freebie, okay? So that was just completely excess. Now try to get your minds back. So they didn't have the welcome mat rolled out when they returned to Israel, and they found themselves in that position where they had these great aspirations for this city. But unfortunately, as Jesus said in that second of laments, that oftentimes people were missing what really made the city great. It's that this is where God showed up. Among those places where God showed up in the world, this is one of the places where God showed up. And we find in Psalm 84, so if we want to turn to Psalm 84, we find there the attention and the beauty being focused on God himself, finding the significance of the place in God himself. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. So it's not just a place where God has established, but it's the living God himself for whom we seek. And the significance and that for which we should look is not simply the places of blessing of God historically, but God himself, who is the blesser. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar. Lord Almighty, my King and my God, blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they may make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. You can say amen to that, Scott. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord God Almighty. Listen to me, God of Jacob. Look on our shield, O God. Look with favor on your anointed one. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. The deep significance, not just in Zion, but the deep significance in our lives is the presence of the living God. And the places that we find beauty and history and significance are those places where we meet with God. It was mentioned a couple weeks ago that at Stainer there was a celebration of the years of Pitch and Praise, which was started as a youth event out of one of our Toronto churches. It was extended to other churches then, became a place over the years that if you ask many who became pastors and leaders in our denomination, they will say the Lord spoke to them at that place. And their call to ministry came out of things that they were meeting with God there. And so one of the reasons why people like getting to camp is because they find that there is a place in just a quiet to have a meaningful relationship, meaningful conversation with the living God. That's our prayer, that when we gather together in worship, when we gather together week by week, that we're not just coming to bounce off one another to meet people, but we're coming here to hear from and to meet with the living God. And we would have those deeply impactful, deeply significant experiences, and those things of which we should sing. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. And we go through those experiences of life. So, Contrary to the first song we sang this morning, or maybe in light of that first song, I would suggest that ours should not be songs of heavenism. So we talked about Zionism, which is the affection for a place. That heavenism can become one of those very things for us. And we think of all the difficulties that we have, and we extract from our picture all those difficulties, and then we look at this promise of a place where we go and the blessings of God are there and so on. Well, our heavenism can become our Zionism, where we lose sight of what it's really all about. What is it that's going to make our eternity glorious? Yes, there's many things that we will just be awe-inspired all the time. We'll want to sing and worship all the time because there will be those things that will catch our attention. But what is significant is that we will spend eternity with the living God. That's what we truly look forward to. And yes, maybe weedless gardens are part of it. Maybe all the other things. Streets of gold, gates of pearl, all those things that the value of heaven is not that it has streets of gold. I love that story about this fellow who decided that he wanted to take some gold with him when he went to heaven, and he got there and he had these heavy bags of gold, and he was greeted and looked at and said, I don't understand why you've brought pavement. See, in our evaluation, in the value system that we have, we look at gold as being so valuable. We look at streets of gold and say, oh, how precious, how valuable. No, in the perspective of heaven, because the Lord is there, His glory, His majesty, His awesome presence, gold is like pavement, tarvy, asphalt, call it what you will, something you walk on. Something you don't give much thought to unless, of course, it's under construction. It's rough as all get out. The lure that brings us back again and again, which will never lose its perennial beauty. Our eternal hope and joy is to be the glorious presence of the living God. And we get to taste that a little bit now, We get a sample of it. And we celebrate it together. So what makes our church gathering significant? We don't come together to celebrate the victories of the Toronto Blue Jays. We don't come to enhance the faith of the Toronto Maple Leafs faithful and say, maybe next year. No, we come together to celebrate, to sing about, to rejoice in the presence of the living God. Revelation 21, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth has passed away, and the sea was no more. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. The Psalms are songs. And Bevan will need the PC powered up. And we're going to listen to Psalm 84, which is done by Shane and Max Desher. And I'd encourage you, the words aren't going to be on the screen, but listen to them. Maybe you want your eyes closed during this. And reflecting on, what is it that I treasure? What is it that I value? What is it that I find draws me again and again and again? And let's just take these moments as we stand in the presence of the living God and we allow him to speak into our hearts. And I invite you to stand with me. And so if you want to click on that last...
There is nowhere majesty is all I wanna see. All I want is you. All I want is you. My soul longs, even faints, for the Lord in this place. You're the source of my strength, Yahweh. Forever home in your house, I'm standing on holy ground, where all I want has been found, Yahweh. There is nowhere else I'd rather be than seated in the presence of my King. Oh, you're the only one I ever need. Your majesty is all I want to see. Oh, all I want is you. Yes, all I want is you. My soul longs, even faints, for the Lord in this place. You're the source of my strength, Yahweh. Forever home in your house, I'm standing on holy ground, where all I want has been found, Yahweh. Even the sparrow finds a home. Even the weary find their rest. Just a day here in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. Even the sparrow finds a home, and even the weary find their rest. Just a day here in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. My soul longs, even faints, for the Lord in this place. You're the source of my strength, Yahweh. Forever home in your house, I'm standing on holy ground, where all I want has been found, Yahweh. The sparrow finds a home, even the weary find their rest. Just a day here in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. Even the sparrow finds a home, even the weary find their rest. Just a day here in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. 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 Yahweh.
You may be seated. And Lord, may you accomplish in us that which you would like to do as we've met in your presence today.